Hello, this is Stacey Shiflett from Calvary Baptist Church in Dundalk. I want to take just a couple of minutes, if I can, and just clarify a few things. The last video I made, I mentioned that I would be addressing a few things, and so I want to do that quickly if I can. I want you to see the whole video, so I'll make it as brief as possible. In the last year and a half, our church has been through one of the deepest, darkest valleys that I have personally ever experienced. When Sarah Jackson came out in May of 2018 with some serious allegations of sexual immorality and misconduct against the former pastor, Cameron Giovanelli. And over the last 19 months, we have been dealing with this, the investigation, detectives in and out of our offices, and cooperating with authorities and news media parked in our parking lot, and our news stations and newspapers here in Baltimore talking about our church for all the wrong reasons, us being in the news. It's been a very difficult year and a half, but we're very grateful to the Lord that He brought this investigation to a conclusion here just a couple of days ago, when Cameron pled guilty and has been sentenced to 90 days in the Baltimore County Detention Center and 5 years probation. And so we're doing our best to try to move past this and put this behind us. But I have been very much aware of the fact that this battle, this trial, whatever you want to call it, this ordeal, has pretty much forever altered me as a person and as a preacher and as a pastor, and it has changed what I believe to be my ministry in a significant way. It has been my prayer that through this, through these trials and through these storms that we've had to endure and these experiences that we've had to face, that God will allow us to be able to be a blessing and a help to others. Through this last year and a half, we've encountered some opposition. I will say that it's been minimal. In fact, I could pretty much name on one hand those that have been vocal. There's probably been many that have not been vocal publicly, but publicly there's been only a handful that have been vocal in their way, in towards the way they've treated us and Sarah and our church and me specifically in some instances for how I've handled this situation. And I want to address that quickly and put this behind me because I don't really want to deal with it anymore. But several people have asked me about Greg Neal and Tom Neal and Alan Domelle and Dr. Bob Gray Sr. and Dr. Jack Trieber. And I want to just make a couple of quick comments and move on. But as far as Greg Neal is concerned, it's unfortunate that back when we talked in May of 2018, or June it may have been, when I told him that Cameron was on his way to his church, I told him what was going on. I told him the investigation was underway. I told him much of the evidence that had already surfaced, and then cautioned him in no uncertain terms against bringing Cameron into the church, and definitely bringing him on staff. As you know, he disregarded my advice, my counsel. We don't know each other that well. We had met once before and talked a few times on the phone, but I told him, and he didn't listen, and instead made him his assistant pastor and tried to start a Bible college with him as the president. And it's unfortunate that he didn't listen. And if the people down there in that church want to, be in that church, knowing what they know now, and that's their choice. I'm not going to try and make it my mission to change anybody's mind about that. As far as Tom Neal is concerned, he created a website for the sole purpose of slandering, trying to destroy me and Sarah Jackson, her family. And it didn't work, but it's still up. TomNeal.org is still up, and the articles that he wrote. And I'm just going to choose from this point forward just pretty much to ignore anything that they may say. As far as Dr. Bob Gray Sr. is concerned, I've never met him. He's been pretty vocal in his social media and on his websites about his position. As far as I'm concerned, it's a very distorted position on restoration and using men in the ministry and men in the pulpit that are under investigation or have this type of a checkered past. He's obviously, in my opinion, dead wrong on that. And I would hate to for anybody to think that that I'm in some sort of a ongoing feud with him. I'm not. I'm going to choose to just disregard or ignore anything that he may say in the future, and anybody that wants to listen to him and follow his lead on that, well, they're welcome to. I have no question that down through the years, God's used some of these men in great ways, but on this situation, they are absolutely dead wrong, and I think most people would agree with me on that. As far as Alan Domelle is concerned, he's probably led more people to the Lord than I ever will, and I'm not being sarcastic, I'm being honest. He's got a passion for souls, but the way he's handled this situation has been nothing short of appalling, and I dedicated an entire chapter of my book, Wolves Among Lambs. In fact, if you buy the book, if you read the book, chapter 21, I deal with his really strange application of the verse, publish it not, to situations like this. He wrote an article back in May of 2018, and I take that article apart in my book on chapter 21. So I won't repeat all of that in the video, but if you want to go look at it, you can. And again, we probably would agree on a lot of things, maybe most things, but on this issue, we would absolutely, teetotally disagree on how sexual abuse allegations are handled and how victims ought to be treated and how those that are accused ought to be treated and how it ought to be handled publicly. We would disagree on that without question. And then several have asked me about Dr. Trieber. I've not heard from him. I've not spoken to him. I've not talked to him or anybody in leadership at North Valley or Golden State. I have received numerous phone calls and emails from members of that church, but I will not divulge the nature of that other than that I appreciate them reaching out. I will say that in chapter 16 of my book, I dealt with the details of the phone call I had with Brother Trieber and how that was supposed to be handled and how it wasn't handled and how it was mishandled. And my whole thoughts and all are on that are in my book. And so I'll not labor that point in the video. What I would like to say is that if we as independent Baptists do not aggressively address our mistakes of the past, how these situations have been handled and mishandled, and if we don't make some strong, serious efforts to change the way we handle these situations, what little bit of credibility we may have left with a lost and dying world will be forever gone. We talk about people leaving the IFB. We talk about people abandoning ship. We talk about preachers and churches that no longer want to be affiliated with the Independent Baptist, and we can blame it on a variety of things. We can blame it on differences of opinion, on Bible translations and music and dress standards and whatever you want to blame it on or attribute it to. But we cannot ignore the fact that the way that these situations have been handled, sexual abuse, preachers in the pulpits using their platform to take advantage of the people of God and churches, and these things, the way they've been mishandled down through the years, this is playing a big part in this mass exodus from the IFB. I've had a number of people ask me, are you going to still be an independent Baptist after this? Let me tell you something. I've been independent Baptist my whole life. I'm a fifth generation independent Baptist, okay? I'm not going anywhere. I'm not affiliated with any other church. I'm not affiliated with any Bible college. I'm not affiliated with any organization. I'm about as independent now as you could possibly be. And so I'm not leaving the quote-unquote IFB, though I am very critical of much of the nonsense and the craziness and the unscriptural practices that go on. And as far as I'm concerned, I will continue to do that as the Lord leads. But I don't really want to take the time that I have left before Jesus comes back and spend it squabbling and feuding with preachers and churches and ministries. I'm not going to do that. I've said what I want to say. I dealt with it in my book. I've dealt with it in several videos. And one of the reasons why I deal with this in chapter 16, why I made the video back in May of 2018 that probably got over 75,000 hits before I pulled it down. It's now back up. It's been back up. I pulled it down for a reason. I put it back up for a reason. But the reason why I made that video, and that's probably been one of the biggest things that a lot of preachers have just kind of stood back and say, I don't know about this guy. It was the fact that Brother Trieber chose after our phone call, after I told him what happened, to stand up in his pulpit and tell his people that they had conducted an honest and thorough investigation. That just simply wasn't true. And I knew it wasn't true. and I couldn't go along with it. I felt like I had an obligation to set the record straight on that, since it was not only done publicly from the pulpit, but it was done on their live stream and sent out across the nation. I felt like that untruth needed to be exposed. I am not out to destroy any man or his ministry or his church, but that statement was not true, and I had to set the record straight. As far as I know, they never conducted any investigation. As far as I know, they didn't call me or our church or the victim or anybody in her family to try to get to the bottom of it. It was all about just trying to maintain their image, and I lost all confidence in that ministry and their leadership through that ordeal. And for the record, I'm personal friends with more than a dozen independent Baptist Bible colleges and their presidents and their leadership. And I chose to send my children to Golden State. And we had 6 of our young people there when this scandal broke. And so anybody that thinks that I hate them or I'm out to destroy them just simply doesn't know the truth. But I felt an obligation at the time to set the record straight, and I'd do that again. And I don't have any regrets for doing that. I do want to say this in closing, that I've been on the phone with a lot of preachers, pastors, well-known preachers, and I could name their names right now and make them uncomfortable, but I don't really see the benefit of that. Let me just say that every preacher that I've talked to, including many of the preachers that were scheduled to preach down at Greg Neal and Tom Neal's conference in Florida that canceled, I told them, A, they shouldn't have gone to start with, and B, that if they were going to have enough principles to cancel that meeting, that they should have publicly stated so and why. And they didn't do that for fear of retribution from the Neals and getting the same kind of treatment that I got and Sarah Jackson got with Tom Neal's website and whatnot. But I've encouraged these men to publicly state their position. I understand that everybody doesn't have the same personality. Everybody's maybe is not as dogmatic as I might be. I'm pretty dogmatic. I'm cut and dried, black and white kind of guy. With me, there's not a lot of gray area. That may be good, that may be bad, I don't know. But I understand that some preachers don't have that personality. And I get that. I'm fine with that. But there's some things really you could be dogmatic about. And pedophiles, sexual abuse is one of them. I don't understand how you could really maintain credibility and not come out with a straightforward position on that subject where there's no question at all from anybody about where you stand. And there's a fine line between diplomacy and cowardice. And that's just my position on that. And so I would encourage pastors, preachers, evangelists, missionaries, church members, mamas, daddies, everybody, state your position. Let everybody know where you stand. And if we're going to draw a line in the sand as to who we fellowship with and who we preach with and who we preach for, maybe this ought to be one of them. What's your position on sexual abuse and child molesters? Where do you stand on pedophilia? Where do you stand on pastors and people in ministry using their authority and their position of leadership to indulge their sexual desires and their flesh? Draw the line. I challenge you to do that. I encourage you to do that. And I want to spend the rest of my days trying to encourage churches to change the culture. Let's change the climate. Let's do what we can to bring about a positive change in this subject and help victims. And I want to just say in closing that if you need me for anything, whether you be a pastor going through a crisis, whether you be a church member going through a crisis in your church and maybe you don't feel like it's being handled correctly and you don't know what to do, and I get a lot of phone calls like that, call me. I'll do what I can to try encourage you, give you some godly advice and counsel. I'm not setting myself up by no stretch of the imagination as an expert on this subject. I'm not an expert, don't profess to be, but I've been around the block a time or two, and maybe God's uniquely prepared me for the fact that I have been a victim in my younger days of sexual abuse and then a pastor dealing with this trial in our church. I feel like God uniquely equipped me to help maybe train pastors and churches and church members on what they can do in these type of situations. I've got a few things in the works, and as soon as I get liberty to tell you what it is, you'll be the first to know. I encourage you to subscribe to this channel if you're not already, so that the next time I put up a video with some information, you'll be one of the first ones to know about it. We covet your prayers. We trust that you will pray for our church as we try to turn the corner here and move past this scandal that our church has been dealing with for the last 19 months. Pray for Sarah Jackson and her family. for God to continue working in their life. And if there's anything I can do for you, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll do what I can to try to help you. In the meantime, God bless you, and we'll talk to you later.